A pirate. Every definition of the word pirate entails something bad. To rob or plunder, to attack and rob ships at sea. You see, I can't be the only person who thought our main protagonist in this story was striving to be something quote-unquote bad, and I can't be the only one. And the thing is, you cannot blame us. Everything we've learned and seen in our day-to-day lives has shown us that pirates are criminals. The word arrives carrying a verdict. In ordinary language, in history books, in legal definitions, in children's shorthand, in the reflexes most of us inherit without thinking too hard about them. The word comes pre-condemned. Because if all you've learned from everyday life, from the basic moral vocabulary of the modern world, is that pirates are criminals, then Monkey D. Luffy announcing with total sincerity that he wants to become king of the pirates does not initially sound aspirational. It sounds disqualifying. It sounds like the story is asking you, right at the front door, to emotionally invest in someone whose dream is built out of a word we've already been trained to associate with theft, violence, lawlessness, and harm. Oda knows exactly what the word carries. He knows that for most readers, especially at the beginning, pirate is not a romantic word first. I mean, I'll take some other shonen examples like protecting the people you love or becoming the Wizard King. Pirate King sits in a different register. I think that initial discomfort is one of Oda's smartest choices, because it prevents the story from taking moral sympathy for granted. You have to learn slowly what this world means when it says pirate, because the real answer is not the one you brought into the series with you. But just as importantly, the story never lets that old meaning disappear completely either. It keeps the ugliness of the word alive. It gives us pirates who really are cruel, predatory, selfish, grotesque, and violent. It refuses the easy route where pirate simply becomes a synonym for hero once Luffy starts wearing the label. Instead, it keeps asking the same uncomfortable question in more complicated forms. If this word can describe monsters and liberators with equal ease, what is it actually naming? Now here's an experiment. Take the word pirate out of One Piece and hand it to 10 different people in the story and ask them what it means. Buggy will tell you it means the right to take what you want, as long as you can make people flinch first. Kaido will tell you it means having earned through raw strength, the right to sit on top of everyone weaker than you, and that anyone who tells you otherwise is lying to your face about how the world actually works. Whitebeard, if he were still alive to answer, would probably just gesture at his crew and say nothing, because to him the word never needed defining. It just meant family, extended as far outward as the sea would let him take it. Blackbeard would smirk and tell you it means never being stupid enough to owe anyone anything. And Luffy wouldn't give you a definition at all. He'd just keep walking toward the next person who needed help. Because to him, pirate was never a noun. It was a verb he was still in the middle of. None of these answers is wrong. This is a shonen manga with over 1100 chapters, and it has never once settled on a stable definition of the word that sits in its own title. It's the entire point of the world building. Pirate in One Piece is not a job description, a legal category, or even primarily a criminal identity. It is a philosophical position, and the specific position it marks is a relationship to authority. All the pirates I just mentioned have almost nothing in common in method or morality. What they share is the moment, sometime in their past, when each of them looked at the structure the world had built to tell them who they were allowed to be, and said no. Everything after that no is where they stop resembling each other. To be a pirate in One Piece is not about what you do. It is about the specific relationship you choose to have with the world's authority. And that relationship comes in radically different, often opposed forms, all of which the story is willing to call pirate. This is what I love about One Piece, because the word is not a genre label. The word pirate is a battlefield on which the whole series conducts its argument about what freedom actually requires. The world government's official position on pirates is about as blunt as a legal position can be. Pirates are criminals. Full stop. They are to be captured or executed on sight. Bounties are posted. The entire marine institution exists, at least nominally, to enforce this. And if you only read the government's own propaganda, the word pirate would just be a synonym for outlaw, and this video would be over before it started. But the story spends enormous energy showing you that the government's definition of criminal is not actually about conduct. It's about threat to authority, dressed up as a moral judgment. The clearest proof of this is the celestial dragons, legally untouchable, above every law the Marines enforce against everyone else, and yet routinely shown committing acts that would make most pirate captains look restrained by comparison. These are not pirates. They are, structurally, the opposite of pirates, the most protected class the world's authority has ever produced. And their conduct is often more monstrous than anything most pirate crews do on a given page. So, criminal cannot be the operative definition, because the label is applied with total disregard for actual behavior, but it does track one thing consistently, and that is if you exist inside the world government's authorized structure or outside it. Robin becomes a criminal at age 8 for surviving a massacre and knowing something the government would rather erase. That's a description of what she represents to an institution that needs to control information. The word criminal, in this story's own internal logic, tells you about the government's threat perception, not about the person it's attached to. If criminal doesn't hold up, maybe the simpler definition works. A pirate is just someone outside the law, full stop. But the story explicitly refuses to let pirate and outside the law collapse into each other, because it gives us a second category of outlaw that behaves completely differently. The revolutionary. Dragon's organization exists for one purpose: the overthrow of the current world government. It is collective, coordinated, and aimed at a specific future political outcome. Every revolutionary is working, in some fashion, toward the same endpoint. A pirate crew doesn't work like that at all. The Straw Hats aren't trying to overthrow anything as a structural goal, even though they end up doing enormous damage to the old order along the way. Whitebeard's crew wasn't organized around a political program. Even Blackbeard's crew, as ambitious and destructive as it is, isn't marching toward a shared ideological future. And this is the defining difference. A revolutionary's freedom is collective and deferred, aimed at some future state where the structure itself changes. A pirate's freedom is personal and immediate, regardless of whether the world's overall structure ever changes at all. An example of this is when Sabo crosses from runaway noble into revolutionary, is doing something categorically different from what he'd be doing if he'd simply become a pirate. Both reject the world government's authority. Only one of them is organizing to replace it. The third and most seductive false definition is Kaido's own worldview, which is pirates are simply the strong, and the strong are entitled to dominate the weak, and everything else is decoration on top of that one hard fact. But strength worship isn't the definition of piracy. It's Kaido's specific answer to a question that comes after the definition. Being strong doesn't make you a pirate. Plenty of powerful people in this world are not pirates at all. What makes Kaido a pirate is the same thing that makes Luffy a pirate. At some point, Kaido rejected being subordinate within someone else's structure of authority. What he did with that rejected space, dominate it completely, become its new tyrant, is his answer to a question every pirate eventually has to answer for themselves. Freedom for what? Kaido's answer happens to be freedom to become the new master. That's a real answer. It's not the definition itself. If pirates disagree about literally everything downstream, there has to be something they agree on upstream, or the word means nothing at all. Here's the one thing I think actually holds. Every pirate in One Piece has, at some identifiable point, refused to accept the life the world's structures had already assigned them. And look at how consistently the story stages this exact moment, regardless of how differently their stories end up going. Luffy refuses the safety Garp keeps trying to force on him, a marine grandfather's entire life plan for his grandson. Discarded before Luffy is even a teenager. Ace refuses the inheritance of being the Pirate King's son, a legacy that would define him entirely within the world's frameworks whether he wanted it or not, and chooses to build an identity that isn't handed to him by blood. Sabo refuses the noble birth that would have made him an aristocrat with every comfort the world can offer, and burns that inheritance down. Nami refuses to remain Arlong's tribute collector, a role assigned to her through terror and a 10-year contract designed to look like her own choice. Robin refuses to remain nothing more than what the government decided she is, a fugitive defined by a piece of forbidden knowledge, rather than a person. In every one of these cases, the pattern is identical. Something in the world's assigned structure said this is what you are, this is your ceiling, this is the role you occupy, and the person said no, and went to sea. But why the sea specifically? The obvious answer here is that the world government's authority is fundamentally land-based. It's built on islands, on ports, on the fixed points where law can actually be enforced. The sea between those points is precisely where that authority thins out to almost nothing. A ship is, in effect, a small piece of self-governed territory that has been made mobile and is defended entirely by the people inside it. But the ocean itself belongs to no flag, honors no claim of sovereignty, and offers no guarantee of safety to anyone, government aligned or not. To become a pirate, in this specific geography, is to choose to live primarily in the one space the world's authority cannot fully reach. That's why sailing under a pirate flag is the operative image of the whole series rather than simply being an outlaw on land. The flag is a declaration flown specifically over water the government cannot fully claim. In One Piece, a pirate is a person who has decided that authority over their own life belongs to them, and not to any government, family structure, or inherited destiny, and who is willing to accept the entire cost of that decision, including violence, including a bounty on their head, including the world's permanent and organized hostility. That's the threshold. Crossing it says nothing yet about what kind of person you'll be on the other side. It just tells you that you've stopped letting someone else write the answer to, what am I allowed to become? Now I want to talk about a few characters that really sets the stage and defines the pirate spectrum. Kaido and everything that happens in Wano is not incidental to Kaido's character. It is his character. The strong dominate. The weak submit. There's no pretense of justice layered on top of this. Not even the world government's hypocritical version of it. Doflamingo's rule of Dressrosa runs basically on the same logic. He took a kingdom by force and built a court entirely on fear, loyalty purchased through obligation, and the constant threat of violence as the only real form of law. Buggy and the performance of piracy, where the actual substance of freedom is almost entirely theatrical. Buggy doesn't build fear through demonstrated capability the way Kaido does. He builds it through legend, through audacity, through LARPing, and the story's own structure eventually rewards this. And yet by the time the story reaches its endgame, it treats Buggy's ascension with something close to a straight face, rather than as an ongoing joke. There are two ways to read this. One being Buggy is a parody of the pirate concept, proof that reputation in this world is often almost entirely performance rather than substance, and that the system rewarding him exposes how flimsy the whole apparatus of legendary pirate actually is. Or the other being Buggy is evidence that the threshold of piracy doesn't require nobility, competence, or even courage to cross, only refusal. He never stopped existing loudly in a world that, whether it intends to or not, keeps rewarding audacity. He's proof the entry price is lower than the myth of piracy usually implies, and that what you build afterward can still be swept into something larger than the person who started it, almost despite himself. Whitebeard and the reconstruction of what was denied. Whitebeard's crew is explicitly built as a substitute family, and the story never asks you to read this metaphorically. It's the literal, organizing principle of his reign. His stated ambition was never conquest. It was making sure his children could live freely. That single-minded devotion, not personal ambition or territorial appetite, is what defines his decades as an emperor of the sea. What makes this the clearest possible contrast to Kaido is that Whitebeard represents a completely different answer to the same question. Freedom for what? His answer being freedom to build the belonging that the world had already denied you once. His crew is a collection of people who mostly had nowhere else to go. No family structure that wanted them. No assigned place in the authorized world that fit. He didn't recruit an army. He assembled the largest and most feared gathering of misfits the sea has ever seen, organized entirely around mutual protection, rather than shared ideology, treasure, or greed. The complete foil to Kaido. Blackbeard and freedom as the absence of constraint. Blackbeard's specific philosophy treats freedom as the absence of any binding obligation to another person's well-being. He is loyal to nothing beyond his own advancement. Not to a crew, not to a code, not even to the loose honor system some of the worst pirates in this world still nominally observe. His crew doesn't serve a shared purpose the way Whitebeard's does. It serves him, and only insofar as it's useful to him. The moment someone stops being useful, the loyalty evaporates. Because there was never really loyalty in the first place, only utility. Set him directly against Whitebeard, because the story does this deliberately. Both are emperors. Both cross the exact same threshold, rejecting the same authority, claiming the same category of freedom the world government cannot touch. And one of them built a family. The other built a machine for consuming anyone useful to his own ambition. This is what I mean when I say when there isn't any positive content to fill freedom, it curdles into pure anarchic self-interest. Blackbeard isn't a deviation from the pirate concept. He's the series' clearest demonstration of what happens when someone crosses the threshold and decides to build nothing at all beyond their own appetite. In a way, he is the realest pirate in this series. And last but not least, Luffy and freedom as a gift you extend to others. Here's where the spectrum turns a corner instead of just continuing along it. Luffy's answer to freedom for what is structurally different from every other name on this list. Not just morally different. Every other pirate here treats freedom as something you claim and hoard. Luffy treats it as something he actively extends to the people he encounters, at real and repeated cost to himself. He doesn't stop at rejecting the world's authority over his own life. He goes out of his way, over and over, to interrupt the world's authority over other people's lives. This is the specific quality that makes the freest man in the world a meaningful title. Luffy's freedom is not zero-sum. Giving it away to Nami doesn't leave him with less of it. This is the direct opposite of Kaido's model, where freedom is purchased by placing someone else under your authority. Luffy's model treats someone else's freedom as something that can exist alongside his own without either one shrinking. Two of the earliest, smallest moments in the whole series already contain this in miniature. When Luffy stabs himself under the eye as a child to prove he can withstand pain for Shanks' sake, it's not really about pain tolerance. It's a commitment to a dream made before he has any actual capacity to defend that dream. The pirate identity, chosen before the pirate life, is even remotely possible. And the second moment is when Nami is finally pulled out from under Arlong's decade of engineered debt and terror. And for the first time with this much weight, the moment pirate and freedom become functionally the same word, because he simply refuses to let her stay owned by fear a moment longer than it takes him to punch through the arrangement. The Pirate King, the single epitome of piracy, the freest. I think this single word choice is the thematic key to the whole 1100 plus chapters. The title the entire world is racing to claim was never framed by the person who first held it as a title of domination. It's a title of a specific quality of being, and the fact that it's called freest rather than strongest or greatest tells you what Oda has apparently believed. This whole time, the ultimate human aspiration actually is freedom. To be a pirate is to be functionally free. The Rox-Roger contrast at the story's origin point reads as the most deliberate proof of this. Two contemporaries, both operating at the absolute peak of the era before the next generation, both capable of defining the ultimate pirate ambition however they chose. Rox pursued the goal of becoming king of the world itself, domination, total and literal. Roger's crew found the throne and the treasure the world had spent centuries hiding, the freedom to do, the freedom to know, and the freedom to acquire. Oda gave readers two competing definitions of what the ultimate pirate ambition could be, right at the story's foundation, and the entire narrative since has been building the case for which one the world actually needs. Luffy doesn't argue his way toward inheriting Roger's definition. He doesn't monologue about freedom the way a lesser story might require him to. He acts his way into it, and the consistency between what he says and what he actually does under pressure is what makes the eventual title mean something, rather than functioning as an empty prize at the end of a treasure hunt. Walking calmly toward a celestial dragon at Sabaody, fully aware of what striking one means, and doing it anyway because Hatchin getting shot in front of him isn't something he's willing to just witness, and ordering the world government's flag burned at Eni's lobby, an act which is purely symbolic, stupid, and costly. But that is who Luffy is, and there are countless examples of this, but these two are the two scenes that struck me the most. Each of these is Luffy defining the title through conduct, before a single word of philosophy gets attached to it. And the Jolly Rogers. Every crew flies a Jolly Roger. I mean, it's pure decoration, right? The genre furniture every pirate needs. I don't think that's what it's doing here. The flag is a declaration, flown specifically over water no government owns, that says, we exist outside your authority, and we are not hiding it. A pirate could, in theory, sail without a flag at all, and avoid drawing marine attention, keep the rejection of authority quiet and personal. Almost nobody in this story does that. The flag turns a private decision into a public one, which is why burning the world government's own flag at Eni's lobby is, to me, the single clearest visual argument in the entire series for what pirate costs, when it's fully lived rather than quietly enjoyed. The Straw Hats don't need to burn that flag to rescue Robin. Sogeking fires the Firebird star at Luffy's direct order after Spandam boasts that Robin is now the enemy of the entire world. Luffy has decided the rescue isn't enough. This has to be declared, guaranteeing an admiral's personal pursuit, guaranteeing a life under permanent, escalated threat in exchange for absolutely no tactical advantage. That's the whole argument in one image. A freedom you're only willing to enjoy quietly, without ever declaring it where the world can see, is not the freedom this story is actually arguing for. So, is pirate just a marketing term for villainy? I want you to take a second and think about that yourself for a moment. The term pirate, across this entire cast, is such an incoherent category that the word barely means anything at all. It's genre trapping. Kaido, Doflamingo, and Big Mom commit atrocities that have nothing to do with any coherent theory of freedom. They're simply violent people, and pirate is doing no different for them than the word warlord. If the same word can describe Luffy's liberation project and Kaido's brutal occupation of an entire country, then maybe the word pirate isn't meaningful at all. Maybe it's just a costume the story puts on wildly different characters, because the genre requires everyone to wear one. But if pirate meant one specific thing, if it collapsed cleanly into good or bad, liberator, or tyrant, the word would stop doing the thematic work Oda actually needs from it. The entire point is that crossing the threshold, rejecting the world's authorized structure, is morally neutral in itself. It's a starting condition. What matters, what the 1100 chapters are actually spending their runtime on, is what a person builds once they've crossed that line. Pirate describes the threshold. The story describes everything that happens after. Marines represent authorized force, violence and control legitimized by the world government's institutional stamp of approval. The story is relentlessly careful to show that this legitimacy is a matter of paperwork. Akainu commits what amounts to a war crime against Ohara with the full institutional backing of absolute justice behind him, and faces no internal reckoning for it. The institution simply absorbs the act and calls it doctrine. The Celestial Dragons operate entirely above accountability, despite being the group with the most legitimate institutional standing in the entire world. Ohara's genocide was official policy, carried out in the name of absolute justice as a doctrine, and yet, Marines like Smoker, Kobe, and Garp frequently act with more genuine moral clarity than the institution that employs them. The pirate/marine divide in One Piece is not good or evil, and that's precisely the point rather than a contradiction of it. It's a divide between self-authorized freedom and institutionally authorized force. The label tells you about the source of someone's power and legitimacy, not the quality of their character. Pirates are evil, the Marines are righteous. These terms have always changed throughout the course of history. Justice will prevail, you say? Of course it will. Whoever wins this war becomes justice. What Doflamingo understands, even if he weaponizes the insight cynically, is that institutional legitimacy in One Piece is never the same thing as moral truth. The Marines can call themselves justice, and the world can accept the label, but that only proves who has the authority to name things, not who is actually right. Doflamingo's speech sharpens the exact point I'm trying to make here. Marine being authorized force, and pirate being self-authorized freedom, but neither label guarantees virtue. The side with power gets to stabilize its language long before there even is moral credibility. A pirate crew, in essence, is a found family, a voluntary society. Every straw hat joins by choice. Each one retains an individual dream that the crew as a whole exists to support rather than subordinate to some larger collective purpose. Usopp's ambition to become a brave warrior of the sea, Nami's map of the world, Sanji's search for the All Blue, Brook's promise to Laboon. None of these dreams get folded into the crew's mission and erased. And crucially, any of them could leave at any point without the crew forcibly preventing it. Set this against every alternative social structure the story shows you. Baroque Works binds its agents through fear, blackmail, and hierarchical secrecy. Nobody in that organization chose their role the way a Straw Hat chose theirs. The Vinsmoke Germa command structure binds Sanji's siblings through genetic engineering and inherited military obligation, a structure so total that Sanji's entire arc is about escaping it. A pirate crew, at its best, is a miniature demonstration of what a society looks like when it's built entirely from freely chosen bonds, rather than inherited or imposed structure. Oda is using the ship itself as a laboratory for a political philosophy the larger world of the story has never once been allowed to try. To be fair, Oda could have told this story about revolutionaries, or mountain bandits in the more generic Western sense. He chose pirates specifically, and I don't think that choice is incidental to what the story ended up being able to argue. Pirate is a word that already, in the real world, before One Piece ever touches it, refuses to resolve cleanly into hero or villain. Historically and culturally, pirates have always been simultaneously romanticized as free spirits living outside every rule that binds ordinary people, and condemned as violent thieves who took what wasn't theirs by force. That exact pre-existing ambiguity is the raw material this entire 20-plus year argument is built from. Oda didn't invent the instability in the word itself. He found it already sitting there in the language, and built a case on top of it about what a person actually does with the specific, dangerous, costly freedom of standing entirely outside the world's authorized structure, and that is amazing. To be a pirate in One Piece is to have crossed the one threshold every name I have mentioned in this video shares. The decision that your own life is yours to author and no one else's, and then to spend everything that follows discovering what you actually believe freedom is for. Some build empires of fear, because an unfilled freedom curdles fastest into domination. Some build families, because freedom's most durable use might just be making sure no one else has to feel as unwanted as you once did. Some build nothing at all beyond their own appetite. And the story is honest enough to show you exactly how empty that particular use of freedom turns out to be, even at the height of its power. And one of them, so far, has spent his entire life giving his freedom away to everyone he meets without ever once running out of it. And I genuinely believe that last part, Luffy's model, is the story's actual argument for what freedom should become, not just its most beautiful exception. But the story keeps stacking evidence that every other model on the spectrum eventually runs into a wall. Its own logic can't get past. Kaido's dominance requires an endless supply of people willing to submit, and the story spends all of Wano proving that supply isn't actually endless. Blackbeard's consumption requires an endless supply of people worth consuming, and eventually there's no one left who trusts him enough to be useful. Even Whitebeard's family, as beautiful as it is, couldn't survive its founder's death, because it was never designed to outlast the one man holding it together. Luffy's model is the only one on this list that seems to scale. The only one where giving freedom away doesn't create scarcity, doesn't require a founder to stay alive forever, and doesn't eventually run out of raw material to spend it on. That's the entire 1100 chapter argument arriving, slowly and expensively, at its answer. the freest man in the world. But what exactly does that phrase actually mean in practice? The answer to that is pretty simple. Oda has spent every chapter since chapter 1 making the case for whose version of freedom actually deserves to be the one that gets remembered.